Welcome back to the Roast It Yourself podcast brought to you by Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop, not Current Cop, not a current police officer, Current Crop Roasting Shop. I'm Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral in Jackson, Mississippi, and with me in person for this, our Christmas episode.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is going to drop the Friday after Christmas 24.
Yes.
So I don't have any Christmas content planned. I'm not even dressed for it, but this is what's happening. So, with me for this Christmas episode is Catherine Mansell, certified Q grader and director of Current Crop Roasting Shop in New Orleans, Louisiana. Catherine, how are you today?
Good. I'm home for Christmas, which is always great. I had some last minute things to do, which only took me about 6 hours today,
Yeah,
which I was in a good mood.
yep.
So it was nice. And now when I get out to the house, I'll be there for 3 whole days
There you go.
without having to
There
do
you go.
anything else.
And my wife was like, "I'm going to do a Target pickup order today," and I was like, "No, you're not. Not if I want to see you before Christmas. You're
Right.
not.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
terrible. Like,
So
no, if
many
we don't have
people.
it, we don't need it
Yeah.
now.
Right.
So each week we set aside about 10 minutes to field questions from home coffee roasters and professionals alike about roasting, tasting, and most importantly, enjoying coffee. You can send your questions to questions@riypod.com. That's questions@riypod.com to get a nice shout out from us and, of course, to get your question answered. This week we've got a question from a listener, Brian N., who asks us, "Hi, and thank you for the podcast." I can tell he's not from the South because he didn't say thank you all for the
There
podcast.
you go.
Thank you for the podcast. I discovered it a few weeks ago and really enjoyed it. You have mentioned the Fresh Roast SR 800 a few times, which is what I've been using for the last few months. Congratulations, that's awesome.
Mhm.
I have the regular extension tube and the Razzo extension tube for it, and I'm still figuring out which one I prefer. I have a general question about using the roaster. Do you think there's any need or benefit to preheating the roaster before adding the green coffee beans? I am wondering if this could help, especially roasting in colder temps. Thank you, Brian. Okay,
Thanks,
Catherine.
Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for the question. And Catherine, what about roasting in cold temps? Preheating?
Um, well, on a fresh roast, the the temperature gets hot very quickly. So I have never preheated my air roaster. Now I preheat the Alio,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it takes a while to preheat so I can get it to that higher temperature. So when I charge, it doesn't go all the way back down and have a very long roast. So I preheat quite high so I can have a nice short roast and do everything I need. But I've never preheated. With a fresh roast. And I know that outside temperatures can dramatically affect the roaster itself. I'm wondering what colder temps, how extreme these
Yeah.
temperatures are.
If you look at Home Roasting Supplies, the manufacturer of the fresh roast, their website, they say anything under 50, that is not designed to roast coffee
Mhm.
under an ambient temperature of 50 degrees,
Yeah.
which for us is freezing down
Mhm.
here in Mississippi. It's like, oh my gosh, where's my parka? Throw another log on the fire at
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
But some of you are just laughing like it sounds like a beautiful summer day.
Right.
But yeah, they'll tell you under 50 degrees Fahrenheit, it struggles to roast coffee at that temperature.
Mm.
And I think the reason is the heat's delivered through convection with the fresh roast. So you're heating the air, and there's not a recirculating air movement in the fresh roast. It's coming from the outside the roaster through the roaster and back
Right.
out.
Mhm.
So it's not recirculating that hot air. So it's having to heat every cubic foot. How do you measure air? Every bit of air
Yeah.
that flies through that roaster has
Yeah.
to be heated from ambient to roasting temperature
Right.
in a millisecond, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
as it passes those heating elements.
Yeah.
And so if you start too low, if the air it's pulling in is too cold, it can heat it up quite a bit, but it won't hit that roasting coffee threshold in that short amount of time. Something that people that normally roast outside have done. I've heard of a couple of people doing different things. One of them is if you roast in an enclosed space, a well ventilated enclosed
Mhm.
space, like
Yeah.
a garage or a shop or something like that outside. If you can plug some sort of like space heater in to kind of warm the air up in your roasting area ahead of time. If you've got a wood stove or something like that, that you can heat that air up just to get, even if it's negative outside, if you can just get it above that 50 degrees inside wherever you're roasting,
Yeah.
that makes a big difference. I've also seen people roast in their fireplace. People that you want to make sure you get all the ash cleaned out. But yeah, put they clear it out, put the fresh roast in the fireplace
Oh
in their
wow,
house. Yes,
that's
yes.
smart.
Yeah, I know. It's got a chimney. It's
Yeah,
got like all that, right? So
built-in ventilation
really
right
smart. You're
there.
in your
Yeah.
house, so if your house isn't freezing, which hopefully it's not,
Yeah.
if that's the case, roasting coffee is at least your worries.
All right.
But in the fireplace, if you clean it out real good, so it's not sucking a bunch of ash or dust up into it,
Yeah.
then that could be a great solution. There are some things you could do, but you don't get the benefit preheating the fresh roast. I think preheating, like with a drum roaster like the Bullet you were talking about, the Aleo Bullet,
Yeah.
preheating with that makes sense because the drum itself is what delivers the heat to the beans. It's not direct fire. It's not convection mostly. It's mostly that conduction.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to preheat.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, and I'm just hogging the mic. I'm sorry. I will say one more. I have a lot of opinions about preheating the fresh roast. The one area that I've seen preheating actually help a little bit is if I'm going to do like multiple roasts relatively back to back. There is a difference between that first cold roast and the next two or three that I do.
Yeah.
And that's because there is a minute difference that actually warming the roaster up does take some heat that could go to the coffee beans.
Right.
It just does. So if you're going to do multiple back to back and you want to use a similar recipe, you want the same result, it does help to preheat it, but you can't fix freezing air
Right.
by preheating.
Got something. So I do warm up roasts
Mm-hmm.
on every roaster that I use.
Okay.
So if I need to roast, 3 pounds of coffee and I'm using the fresh roast, the first roast that I do is with past crop coffees. So even in the Bullet, every day when I go in, I use the same profile and I do a warm up roast with 1.5 pounds of past crop coffee. Every time I use a roaster, I use a warm up
I
roast
see.
first.
Okay.
And we have a box of free coffee behind the register at Current Crop. The ends of something, maybe 8 grams of something,
Right.
so we have a free box. So I use seasoning beans and warm up the roast, and I put those in the free box, just so
That's
people
awesome.
can. I'm not good at throwing coffee away.
No, we don't want to waste, right? Yeah.
But that's what I do. So I always warm up the roaster, no matter which roaster I'm using, only by not necessarily preheating, but doing an actual warm up roast
Wow.
every time.
Yeah, and by the way, we at Coffee Bean Corral we do sell seasoning beans, and seasoning beans is one of our most popular blends. There are some 5-star ratings on that coffee. People rave about that coffee, and it's never the same twice.
Never.
It is it is always random coffee. I'll go do some roast. I'll have 4 barrels of like 4 jugs of coffee, like coffee beans upstairs, and I'm like, oh, I didn't label this one. What is it? I'm not sure enough to put it anywhere. Into seasoning beans it goes. And so it's got decafs in there. It's got old coffees. It's got all kinds of stuff in seasoning beans. But people are like, heck, it's like $4.50 a pound. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So check out the seasoning beans if you want to enjoy a very popular cup of coffee that changes all the time, or do a seasoning roast like you're talking about.
I think that could be good for Brian too. Just go ahead and get something going. As long as you have the outside temperature or the temperature where you are going up to at least 50, then do a warm-up roast and then just start pumping it out and it should just get better.
Yeah. So these are some ideas. It's a real problem roasting coffee in the cold because, it's not like you need less coffee in the winter months.
Yeah.
You still need it and
Still
some
need that.
delicious hot beverage.
Yeah.
But that is some things you can do. So Brian, I hope that was a helpful answer to what to do about the preheating and what we think about that. But anyway, if you're like Brian and you have a question about coffee roasting, coffee tasting, coffee enjoying, you could write us an email and get and wait and sit like a bump on a log and wait for us to get around to it at one question per episode.
Yeah.
Or you could attend our New Year's live stream event and have direct access to the brains behind the roast. I'm saying with such sarcasm, the
Yes.
brains behind the
These
roast it yourself.
brains.
These two brains right here. Yeah, the New Year's live stream event is going to be on the 3rd of January. It's going to be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Central Standard. Don't worry if you can't make that. It's going to be an hour and a half of us responding to questions in real time, going through some of the questions we have in our email list, our backlog, and basically just we want to be that resource to you guys in a more immediate way. We will post it later, but people that get tickets have early access to all of that, to the recording, and and of course they can be there to ask us questions. Very excited about that, and so we hope you get to come. If you want to come, you can either buy a coffee roaster and get a free ticket.
Yeah.
That's an option. You know what? You might need a second one. You might need a third roaster. Get a free ticket. Or you can just buy the ticket directly. I'll put a link for that in the show notes. Use a promo code RIYPOD, RIYPOD, and get 50% off of that ticket. Proceeds just go to help us buy better sound equipment, video equipment, and hopefully one day better looking people to come and answer your questions. One day.
One day. Some of those.
One day. But anyway, Catherine, in all of that, is it possible that we left anything out?
Of course. We also left out our Instagram page.
Oh
So
my
don't
gosh.
forget about RIY_pod. I just started that last week.
Tearing it up.
Yeah.
Tearing it up.
We may have missed something. Yeah.
It's possible. It's possible. So if you have different opinions about things and you're very mad at us about what we've said here today, go and like and follow our Instagram page and all that stuff. And then go to the podcast or YouTube app of your choice and let us know what we missed, what we can do better, what we said that was not quite right. And most of all, your hacks for roasting in cold temperatures. That would be what we want. So
definitely.
Otherwise, and we by the way, we can't do any of this without the people that make this possible. Our audio video team that makes us look and sound good. We thank you guys very much. Remember to send your questions you have about coffee roasting, coffee tasting, anything like that, to questions@riYpod.com. Otherwise, have a great day and happy roasting.
Happy roasting. Thanks, y'all.